Captain Li Huan stood on the bridge of the human ship Tenacity and watched the stars through the big front window. The ship was not very big compared to the alien vessels he had seen before, but it was home to him and his crew of 30 people. His second-in-command, Dr. Park Mina, was checking some readings on her computer screen while making notes in her small notebook. The Tenacity was a research ship, not a warship. It had been built to study new planets and discover new forms of life. In space, the ship had basic weapons, but nothing like the huge guns that the alien warships carried. Li Huan often wondered why Earth had sent his ship to represent humanity in this part of the galaxy, when there were much bigger and stronger ships. Back home, Dr. Park Mina walked over to the captain with a worried look on her face. She had been studying the alien species in the Galactic Council for 3 years now and had learned to speak several alien languages fluently the other species respected her because she was smart and always tried to be peaceful in her work, Captain. We just received a message from the Council headquarters, she said. The Vorthic Empire has declared war on all Council members. They are demanding that every species send their best fighting ships to help defend the galaxy. Li Huan felt his stomach drop. The Vorthic Empire was something that even the strongest alien species feared. They had conquered dozens of worlds in the past, and their ships were said to be nearly impossible to destroy. The captain had hoped that this day would never come. What ships is Earth sending? He asked, even though he already knew the answer. Dr. Park Mina looked down at her feet. Just us, sir. The Council thinks that humans are not strong enough to make a real difference in a big war. They said our ship should stay at the edge of the battle zone and record what happens in the engine room. Kim Dae was working on the ship systems when he heard the announcement over the ship speakers. He was a brilliant engineer who could fix almost anything, but he knew that his skills would not help much against the Vorthic war machines. He had seen the reports about their weapons, and their ships were at least 10 times bigger than the Tenacity. The other crew members gathered in the main meeting room to discuss what they should do. Everyone knew that humans were considered the weakest species in the Galactic Council. The Krell had thick armor that could stop almost any weapon. The Zephyrians could shoot energy beams from their hands. The collective could think and act as one mind with millions of members, but humans had nothing special. They were just people with basic technology and soft skin that could be hurt easily. The other species often made jokes about how humans needed to wear special suits just to breathe in space, while many aliens could survive in the vacuum without any protection. Lieutenant Commander Choi Sang was the ship tactical officer, and he had been studying military history since he was a child. He knew about famous battles and great generals from Earth history, but he also knew that human tactics had never been tested against alien technology. The weapons and strategies that worked on Earth might be useless against the Vorthak. 3 days later, the first reports started coming in from the battle at Kepler Station. The Galactic Council had sent 12 of their most powerful fleets to stop the Vorthic advance. Each fleet had hundreds of ships with weapons that could destroy entire planets. The Council leaders were confident that their combined forces would easily defeat the Vorthic, but they were wrong. The battle lasted only 18 minutes. The Vorthic dreadnoughts appeared from nowhere and began destroying Council ships faster than anyone thought possible. Their weapons cut through the strongest alien shields like they were made of paper. The alien admirals tried to use their standard battle formations, but nothing worked. The Tenacity was positioned far behind the main battle fleet with orders to stay hidden and record everything. Li Huan watched through the ship sensors as one by one the Council fleets were destroyed. The alien ships that had seemed so powerful and advanced were being torn apart by the Vorthic war machines. Kim Dae monitored the energy readings from the battle, and his face grew pale as he realized what was happening. The Vorthak were not just using superior weapons, they were using some kind of psychological warfare that made the alien crews panic and make mistakes. Dr. Park Mina was frantically taking notes as she watched the battle unfold. She had never seen anything like this before. The Vorthic ships moved in perfect formation and seemed to know exactly where the Council ships would be before they even got there. It was like they could read the minds of the alien commanders. Captain, we need to help them, someone shouted from the crew, but Li Huan shook his head. There was nothing that one small research ship could do against the Vorthak fleet. The Tenacity had only basic weapons and no armor. The crew would be killed in seconds if they joined the battle when the battle was over the space around Kepler. Station was filled with the wreckage of Council ships. Thousands of alien crew members were dead, and the Vorthak had not lost a single vessel. The surviving Council ships retreated toward their home systems, leaving the Vorthak free to continue their advance. The crew of the Tenacity watched in silence as the Vorthak fleet began moving toward the next target. The alien ships were huge and dark, with strange designs that seemed to hurt the eyes just by looking at them. The humans could feel something wrong about those ships even from a great distance, but instead of returning to Earth or joining the retreating Council fleets, Liho made a decision that surprised everyone. He ordered the Tenacity to follow the Vorthak fleet, but to stay far enough away that they would not be detected. There. Park Mino looked at him with confusion. Captain, what are we doing? We should report back to Earth or help the survivors. Lee Juan stared at the enemy ships on the main screen and spoke quietly. We are going to watch and learn. The Council species have been fighting the same way for thousands of years. They charge forward and shoot everything they have. The Vorthak have learned to counter that strategy perfectly, but we are humans. We do things differently. We study our enemies before we fight them. We learn their weaknesses and their patterns. We survive by being smart, not by being strong. The Tenacity began following the Vorthak fleet through space, staying just outside sensor range. The crew worked in shifts to monitor every detail of the enemy ships, their movements, their formations, their weapons. The humans were no longer just witnesses to the war. They were becoming something that the galaxy had never seen before, a species that would rather understand their enemy than simply fight them. The Vorthak had conquered half the galaxy by using fear and superior technology, but they had never faced an enemy that refused to be afraid. As the days passed, the crew of the Tenacity began to realize that they were seeing patterns in the Vorthak attacks. The enemy was not just randomly destroying things. They were following a specific plan and using the same tactics over and over again. The real war was about to begin, and the humans were the only ones who knew it. For 2 weeks, the Tenacity followed the Vorthak fleet through 3 different star systems. The human crew worked day and night to collect information about their enemy. They recorded everything: the shape of the ships, the energy patterns from their weapons, the way they moved through space, and even the sounds their engines made. Dr. Park Mina barely slept during this time. She was studying the Vorthak behavior patterns and making detailed notes about everything she observed. The enemy ships always attacked in the same way. First, they would send out some kind of signal that made the defending species panic. Then they would move into a specific formation and destroy everything in their path. Kim Day was working 18 hours every day analyzing the energy readings from the Vorthak ships. He discovered that their weapons were not actually much more powerful than Council technology, but they were being used in a completely different way. The Vorthak seemed to know exactly where to hit enemy ships to cause maximum damage. One night, while most of the crew was sleeping, Dr. Park Mina made an important discovery. She had been studying video recordings of the Vorthak attacks when she noticed something strange. The enemy ships were not just trying to destroy the Council fleets, they were trying to create fear and panic among the alien crew. She called Captain Lee Juan to her laboratory and showed him what she had found. Look at this, Captain, she said, pointing to her computer screen. Every time the Vorthak attack, they first broadcast some kind of signal that affects the minds of their enemies. The alien crew start making mistakes and acting irrationally before the real battle even begins. Li Huan studied the data carefully. He had noticed that the Council ships seemed to fall apart too quickly during the battles, but he had not understood why. Now, it was becoming clear the Vorthak were not just using superior technology, they were using psychology as a weapon. The next morning, Dr. Park Mina called a meeting with all the senior crew members. She explained her discovery to everyone and showed them the evidence. The Vorthak were feeding on the fear of their enemies, literally absorbing the terror they created to make themselves stronger. This explains why they always win so easily, said Lieutenant Commander Choi, saying every species in the galaxy fights the same way. They see the enemy, they get scared, and then they attack with everything they have, but the more afraid they are, the stronger the Vorthak become. Kim Day had been quiet during the meeting, but now he spoke up. I've been studying their ship movements, and I found something interesting during each attack. There is a short period when the Vorthak Ships redirect power away from their defensive systems. They seem to need this time to absorb the fear energy from their victims. How long does this weakness last? Asked Captain Leah. Exactly 47 seconds. Every time, answered Kim Day. The pattern never changes. It happens right after they broadcast the fear signal and before they begin their main attack. Dr. Park Mina realized that this was the key to defeating the Vorthak. The enemy was not invincible. They had a weakness that could be exploited, but first the humans needed to understand exactly how the Vorthak mind control worked and how to defend against it. She began studying human psychology and comparing it to what she knew about alien minds. Humans had evolved on a dangerous planet where fear was often the difference between life and death, but they had also learned to control their fear and use it to their advantage. The other species in the galaxy had not faced the same challenges. Most alien worlds were peaceful places, where cooperation and logic were more important than courage and determination. The alien species were simply not prepared to resist the kind of psychological warfare that the Vorthak used. Over the following days, the crew of the Tenacity observed 3 more Vorthak attacks. Each time they saw the same pattern: the fear signal, the defensive weakness, and the systematic destruction of the enemy fleet. But they also noticed something else. The Vorthak were becoming predictable. Lieutenant Commander Choi Sang began developing new tactics based on what they had learned. He studied ancient human military strategies and adapted them for use against the Vorthak. The key was to never do what the enemy expected and to always stay calm under pressure. We need to test our theories, said Captain Leah Wan, but we cannot risk the lives of our crew. If we are wrong about the Vorthak weaknesses, we will all be killed. Dr. Park Mina had an idea. She suggested that they find a way to help the surviving council fleets without directly engaging the enemy. The humans could share their knowledge and let the aliens test the new strategies. Kim Day worked for 3 days to modify the ship communication system so that it could send encrypted messages to council ships without being detected by the Vorthak. The first message was sent to a Krell battle cruiser that was hiding in an asteroid field. The message contained detailed information about the Vorthak attack patterns and the 47-second weakness window. It also included instructions for resisting the fear signal using human meditation techniques and mental discipline exercises. Days later, the Krell ship encountered a small Vorthak patrol. The battle was different from all the previous ones. The Krell crew did not panic when they received the fear signal. Instead, they waited calmly for the defensive weakness window and then struck with precise timing. The Vorthak patrol ship was destroyed in the first successful victory against the enemy since the war began. The news spread quickly through the remaining council fleets, and suddenly everyone wanted to know about human tactics. But Captain Lie Huan knew that one small victory was not enough. The Vorthak would adapt to the new threat and develop countermeasures. The humans needed to stay ahead of their enemy by continuing to study and learn. Dr. Park Mina discovered that the Vorthak were not just using fear as a weapon, they were actually dependent on it. The enemy species had evolved to feed on terror and panic. Without this psychological energy, they became much weaker. This gave the humans a new idea. Instead of just resisting the fear signal, they could turn it against the Vorthak by broadcasting their own psychological warfare. The crew began developing ways to project human emotions like determination, courage, and stubborn defiance. The Tenacity continued following the Vorthak fleet, but now they were no longer just observers. They were becoming teachers, showing the galaxy how to fight back against an enemy that had seemed unstoppable. Kim Day made one final discovery that changed everything. The Vorthak ships were not just following random paths through space, they were heading towards specific targets in a careful pattern. The enemy was planning something much bigger than anyone had realized. Captain Lie Huan studied the projected course of the Vorthak fleet and felt his blood run cold. They were moving toward the core systems of the galaxy where billions of innocent people lived. If the enemy reached those worlds, the war would be over. The time for observation was ending. The humans had learned everything they could about their enemy. Now they needed to act before it was too late. The real test of human tactics and determination was about to begin. Captain Lie Huan made a decision that shocked his entire crew. Instead of warning the council about the Vorthak advance or returning to Earth, he ordered the Tenacity to travel to Kara's 7, an abandoned industrial world that had been evacuated. When the war started, the planet was covered with massive factories and mining operations that had been left running automatically. The crew thought their captain had lost his mind, but Dr. Park Mina understood what he was planning. "We are not going to fight them with their weapons," she said. "We are going to fight them with our minds and our determination." Cars 7 was a perfect choice for their needs. The planet had been used to build ships and weapons for the Council, but all the workers had fled when the Vorthic threat became known. The automated systems were still running, and the factories could produce almost anything if they were programmed correctly. Kim Day was amazed when he saw the industrial facilities on Kara 7. He had never imagined that such advanced manufacturing technology existed. The alien machines could create complex devices in minutes that would take human factories days to build, but the real advantage was that the Vorthak did not know about this place. The enemy had been focused on attacking populated worlds and military bases. They had ignored the industrial planets because they seemed unimportant. For the first week, the crew worked to understand how the alien factories operated. Lieutenant Commander Choi Sang proved to be surprisingly good at programming the manufacturing systems, while Dr. Park Mina designed new types of equipment that could be used against the Vorthak. Humans were not trying to build bigger weapons or stronger ships. Instead, they were creating tools for information warfare. Kim Day developed special communication devices that could jam Vorthak fear signals and replace them with human thoughts and emotions. Dar Park Mina worked on psychological countermeasures that could help alien crews resist the enemy mind control. She studied human resistance techniques from Earth history, including methods used by prisoners of war and people who had survived terrible disasters. The key was human stubbornness, the ability to keep fighting even when everything seemed hopeless. This was something that most alien species did not understand. They were logical creatures who gave up when defeat seemed certain, but humans had evolved to be unreasonable and to keep trying even when there was no logical reason to continue. Lieutenant Commander Choi Sang developed new battle tactics that would have horrified the Council leaders. The aliens believed in honorable combat and fair fighting, but humans had learned long ago that survival was more important than honor. He created strategies based on ambush warfare, misdirection, and what humans called fighting dirty. These were not the noble single combats that the Krell preferred or the energy duels that the Zephyrians used. This was human warfare, brutal, efficient, and completely unpredictable. The crew worked 18 hours a day for 2 months, turning Kara 7 into a secret base for human operations. They built communication networks that could reach every human settlement in the galaxy and manufacturing systems that could produce specialized equipment for fighting the Vorthak. Communications Officer Nam Yuki established contact with human colonies throughout the rim worlds. She did not ask for help or reinforcements. Instead, she shared information about Vorthak weaknesses and human tactics. Every human settlement received detailed intelligence about the enemy. The message was always the same: when the time comes, you will know what to do. Trust your human instincts and remember that we are survivors. We have faced extinction before, and we are still here during this time. The crew learned that the Vorthak were not just conquerors, they were parasites. The enemy fed on fear and suffering, and they needed to keep creating more terror to survive. This explained why they never simply destroyed a planet quickly. Instead, they took their time and made sure that every victim experienced maximum fear before dying. Dr. Park Mina realized that this was both the enemy's greatest strength and their greatest weakness. The Vorthak had become dependent on psychological warfare. They had forgotten how to fight opponents who refused to be afraid. She began developing what she called human resistance training programs based on Earth military techniques. These included meditation exercises, mental discipline training, and most importantly, the human ability to get angry instead of getting scared. Anger was something that the Vorthak had never encountered before. Most alien species became more afraid when they were threatened, but humans often became more dangerous. Human anger was focused and determined, not wild and panicked. Kim Day made modifications to the tenacity during this time. The ship now carried new types of equipment that could disrupt Vorthak systems and protect human crews from psychological attacks, but the most important change was not in the technology. It was in the crew. The 30 humans on the tenacity had been changed by what they had seen. They were no longer just researchers and scientists. They had become something new, a group of people who understood their enemy better than anyone else in the galaxy. Lieutenant Commander Choi Sang trained the crew in combat. Techniques that emphasized speed, intelligence, and adaptability over strength. These were not the powerful attacks that alien warriors used, but quick, precise strikes that could disable enemy systems without warning. The crew learned to think like guerrilla fighters, to use their environment as a weapon, and to never fight fairly if they could avoid it. They practiced working together as a team where each person knew exactly what the others would do in any situation. Dr. Park Mina developed psychological profiles of different alien species and created customized resistance training for each one. The Krell needed to learn patience and precision, the Zephyrians needed to understand misdirection, and the collective needed to practice individual thinking. As the months passed, the crew of the Tenacity became something that the galaxy had never seen before. They were teachers and warriors, scientists and soldiers, all at the same time. They understood both alien technology and human nature. Captain Li Huan knew that their time on Kara 7 was almost over. Intelligence reports showed that the Vorthak were beginning to move toward the rim worlds, where most human colonies were located. The enemy had decided that it was time to eliminate the weakest species in the galaxy, but the Vorthak were about to discover that they had made a terrible mistake. They thought they were hunting helpless humans, but they were actually walking into a trap that had been 2 months in the making. The crew of the Tenacity was ready to show the galaxy what humans could do when they stopped being afraid and started getting angry. The real war was about to begin, and this time the humans would not be observers, they would be the ones teaching the lessons. 6 months after the victory at Proxima, the galaxy had changed in ways that no one could have predicted. The Vorthak Empire was retreating from dozens of star systems as council fleets using human tactics systematically dismantled their forces. But Captain Li Huan knew that the enemy was not giving up. They were preparing for something much bigger. Intelligence reports from across the galaxy painted a disturbing picture. The Vorthak had withdrawn all their forces to their core systems and were building the largest fleet in galactic history. Thousands of ships were being constructed in secret shipyards, while their scientists worked to develop countermeasures against human tactics. Dr. Park Mina had been studying captured Vorthak technology and prisoners for months, and her findings were deeply troubling. The enemy was not just adapting, they were evolving. Their latest ships showed modifications designed specifically to counter human psychological warfare and stealth tactics. They are learning from us just like we learned from them, she warned the council. The next time we fight them, it will be completely different. They will not make the same mistakes again. The Vorthak had done something that no species in the galaxy had ever attempted. They had studied human nature and developed weapons designed to exploit human weaknesses. Their new ships could broadcast confusion and doubt instead of fear, emotions that were much harder for humans to resist. Kim Dae was working around the clock to develop new modifications for human ships, but he was worried that they might not be enough. The Vorthak had superior technology and unlimited resources, while the humans were still just a small species with limited manufacturing capability. The crisis came sooner than anyone expected. A massive Vorthak fleet appeared at the edge of the Sol system, moving directly toward Earth. The enemy had decided to eliminate the human homeworld and remove the source of resistance tactics. From the galaxy, Captain Li Huan received orders to return to Earth immediately, along with every other human ship that could reach the system in time. The final battle of the war would be fought in humanity's own backyard. The defense of Earth was a desperate effort. Humanity had only 150 ships of various sizes to face a Vorthak fleet of over 3,000 vessels. Most of the human fleet consisted of converted cargo ships and mining vessels with basic weapons and minimal armor. Lieutenant Commander Choi Sang looked at the tactical display and shook his head. The odds were impossible, even with human tactics and superior knowledge of the enemy. There was no way that 150 ships could defeat 3,000. No matter how smart they were, but Captain Li Huan was not worried about the odds. He had learned something about human nature during the long months of fighting that even Dr. Park Mina had not fully understood. Humans were at their most dangerous when they were defending their home. The Vorthak fleet approached Earth in perfect formation, confident that their new tactics and overwhelming numbers would ensure victory. Admiral Keth Vorthak was personally commanding the attack, and he was looking forward to finally destroying the troublesome human species. The battle began exactly as the Vorthak expected. The human ships moved into defensive positions around Earth and prepared to meet the enemy assault, but something was different about the way they were fighting. The humans were not using any of the tactics that had been so successful in previous battles. They were not trying to avoid the enemy or strike at weak points. Instead, they were fighting like every other species in the galaxy, charging forward and engaging in direct combat. Admiral Keth Vorthak was confused but pleased. The humans seemed to have abandoned their clever tactics and were fighting like normal warriors. This would make them much easier to defeat, but Dr. Park Mena was watching from the bridge of the Tenacity with a small smile on her face. She knew something that the Vorthak did not understand. The humans were not fighting desperately, they were fighting angry. Human anger was different from any emotion the Vorthak had encountered before. It was not wild or uncontrolled, but cold and focused. The more damage the enemy inflicted on human ships, the more determined the remaining crews became. They had made one final modification to every human ship in the fleet, but he had not told anyone what it was. The secret would only be revealed when the battle reached its climax. The Vorthak fleet pressed their attack, confident that victory was within reach. They had learned to counter human stealth and misdirection, but they had not learned to counter human fury. The enemy was about to discover why humans had survived every extinction event on their dangerous homeworld. The turning point came when the Vorthak destroyed the human command ship, killing Admiral Chun and his entire staff. The remaining human crews received the news in silence, and then something remarkable happened. Every human ship in the fleet began fighting like they had nothing left to lose. They stopped following orders and started following their instincts. Each crew became an independent unit, focused on causing maximum damage to the enemy. The Vorthak had never seen anything like this before. Every other species became less effective when they lost their command structure. But the humans became more dangerous. They were fighting not as a fleet, but as individuals who all shared the same goal. Day activated his secret modification, and suddenly every human ship in the fleet became invisible to Vorthak sensors. The enemy found themselves fighting an opponent they could not see or predict, but the real surprise was yet to come. The human ships were not trying to win the battle in any conventional sense. They were trying to teach the Vorthak a lesson about what happened when you threatened human survival. Lieutenant Commander Choi Sang coordinated the final phase of the attack from the Tenacity. The human ships formed into small groups and began hunting the largest Vorthak vessels. They were not trying to destroy the entire enemy fleet, they were trying to capture the command ships. The battle became a nightmare for the Vorthak as human crews boarded their ships and began fighting hand-to-hand combat. The enemy had never experienced anything like human determination in close quarters fighting. Captain Lia Huan stood on the bridge of the Tenacity, watching as the dust settled around Earth. The Vorthak fleet was in full retreat, leaving behind dozens of captured ships and thousands of prisoners. He allowed himself a small smile as he realized what had just happened. The galaxy had seen human tactics and human technology in action, but they had never seen human nature. When it was truly unleashed, the Vorthak Empire was finished, not because they had been defeated in battle, but because they had learned to fear something more powerful than their own weapons. They had learned to fear human determination. Dr. Park Mena was already analyzing the captured enemy technology, and she was making discoveries that would change the galaxy forever. The Vorthak were not the apex predators they had pretended to be. They were parasites who had grown weak by feeding on the fear of others. The real war was over, but as Captain Li Huan had predicted, the real show was just beginning. The galaxy was about to learn what humans could accomplish when they stopped worrying about being the weakest species and started acting like the survivors they had always been. The Vorthak had made one final mistake. They had made the war personal, and humans never forgot when someone threatened their home. The Vorthak Third Fleet arrived at the Proxima system like a storm cloud moving across the stars. 3 massive dreadnoughts, each the size of a small moon, were accompanied by 50 smaller warships that still dwarfed any human vessel. The enemy had come to destroy the human mining stations and civilian ships in what they expected to be an easy victory. Admiral Keth Vorthak commanded the fleet from his flagship and was looking forward to an entertaining massacre. The humans were known to be weak and cowardly creatures who would probably surrender before the first shot was fired. This would be a perfect opportunity to feed on fresh terror and add another conquered system to the Empire. Captain Liu Huan watched the approaching enemy fleet from the bridge of the Tenacity. The ship was now hidden among the asteroids, using Kim Day modifications to appear like a piece of space debris. The crew was nervous but determined after months of preparation. Remember, we are not trying to win this battle, he told his crew. We are trying to teach the galaxy how to fight back against the Vorthak. Everything we do here will be recorded and shared with every species in the Council DR. Park Mina was monitoring the enemy psychological warfare systems from her station. She could see the Vorthak beginning to broadcast their fear signals toward the human settlements. The enemy expected to see panic and chaos, but something very different was happening. The human ships were not running away or sending desperate surrender messages. Instead, they were moving into formation and preparing for battle. But more importantly, they were broadcasting something back to the Vorthak, something that the enemy had never heard before. It was the sound of human laughter. The humans had decided to respond to the Vorthak fear signals with genuine amusement. They found it funny that the enemy thought they could be scared by alien mind tricks. The laughter was not forced or artificial, it was the real reaction of people who had seen through their enemy deception. Admiral Keth Vorthak was confused by this response. In thousands of battles, he had never encountered a species that laughed at Vorthak's psychological warfare. The fear signals should have been causing panic and terror, not amusement. Lieutenant Commander Choi Sang was coordinating the human defense from the communications center, but his tactics were unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. Instead of meeting the enemy head-on, the human ships began what he called the dance. The human vessels moved in patterns that seemed random and chaotic. They disappeared behind asteroids, reappeared in unexpected places, and stayed just out of range of the Vorthak weapons. It looked like the humans were running away, but they were actually leading the enemy into a carefully planned trap. Kim Day had spent weeks programming the mining equipment in the Proxima system to respond to specific signals. The asteroids were filled with automated drilling machines and ore processors that could be turned into weapons with the right commands. The Vorthak fleet moved deeper into the system, confident that they were chasing frightened humans who were trying to escape. The enemy ships spread out to cover more area and began targeting the human mining stations. That was exactly what Captain Liu Huan had been waiting for. First phase of the human attack was not a direct assault, but a demonstration of human intelligence. The mining equipment throughout the system suddenly activated and began launching chunks of refined metal at high velocity toward the Vorthak ships. The enemy was caught completely off guard. They had been expecting human ships to fight them, not an entire asteroid field. Turned into a weapon system, the Vorthak shields could handle energy weapons and missiles, but they were not designed to stop thousands of pieces of metal flying at them from every direction. Dr. Park Mina activated the next phase of the plan while the enemy was distracted by the mining equipment. Instead of trying to match the Vorthak psychological warfare, the humans began broadcasting their own mental signals, but these were not fear or anger or any emotion. The Vorthak understood the humans were projecting determination, stubborn defiance, and the uniquely human refusal to give up even when defeat seemed certain. The effect on the Vorthak crews was immediate and devastating. The enemy had evolved to feed on fear and panic, but human determination was like poison to them. The Vorthak began making mistakes, and their perfect formation started to fall apart. Admiral Keth Vorthak realized that something was very wrong. His crews were reporting system failures and navigation errors that made no sense. The human ships were still outnumbered 50-1, but somehow they were winning. The killing blow came during the 47-second window when the Vorthak lowered their defenses to absorb psychological energy, but instead of terror, they found only the iron will of humans who had decided to fight back. The Tenacity emerged from its hiding place among the asteroids and moved toward the enemy. Flagship Kim Day had modified the ship weapons to fire not at the Vorthak armor but at specific weak points that the humans had identified during their months of observation. The shot was not meant to destroy the enemy dreadnought, but to disable its power systems. Captain Liu Huan wanted to capture Vorthak technology and prisoners, not just win a battle. The enemy flagship went dark as its power core was knocked offline. The other Vorthak ships found themselves facing an enemy that fought like no species they had ever encountered. The humans used precision instead of power, intelligence instead of brute force. Lieutenant Commander Choi Sang coordinated the final phase of the attack. The human ships that had been running and hiding suddenly became hunters. They moved in perfect coordination, striking at enemy weak points and then disappearing before the Vorthak could respond. The battle lasted only 30 minutes, but it changed everything. The Vorthak Third Fleet was forced to retreat, leaving behind their disabled flagship and dozens of damaged ships. The humans had achieved the impossible. They had defeated a Vorthak fleet in direct combat, but more importantly, they had done it in a way that could be copied by other species. The entire battle had been recorded and transmitted to every council world the galaxy could see. That the Vorthak were not invincible. Dr. Park Mina was already analyzing the captured enemy technology and prisoners. The Vorthak were physically weak without their psychological warfare and advanced ships. They were bullies who had never learned to fight against opponents who refused to be bullied. Communications Officer Nam Yuki began broadcasting the tactical data to human colonies throughout the galaxy. The message was simple: the enemy could be beaten, but only by fighting like humans. Captain Liu Huan knew that this victory was just the beginning. The Vorthak Empire would not give up easily, and they would learn from this defeat. But the humans had proven something important to themselves and to the galaxy. They were not the weakest species in the council. They were the most adaptable, and that made them the most dangerous. The real war was just beginning, and this time the humans would not be fighting alone. The galaxy was about to learn what humans had known all along. Sometimes the best way to defeat a stronger enemy is to make them fight your fight instead of theirs. The news of the Proxima victory spread through the galaxy faster than any ship could travel. Every species in the council received detailed recordings of the battle and tactical analysis of how the humans had defeated the Vorthak fleet. The impossible had happened, and everyone wanted to understand how. Captain Li Huan found himself called to the council chambers on the capital world of Nexus Prime. He had never wanted to be a hero or a celebrity, but now he was the most famous human in the galaxy. Representatives from dozens of species wanted to learn about human warfare tactics. The council chamber was enormous, with seating for thousands of delegates from hundreds of different worlds. Liu Huan felt very small as he stood at the center of the room, surrounded by alien beings who were all staring at him with intense curiosity. Supreme Chancellor Vorak of the Krell was the first to speak. His voice was deep and powerful, like distant thunder. Human Captain Li Huo, you have achieved something that we believed was impossible. How did your weak species defeat the mighty Vorthak? Li Huan took a deep breath and began to explain. It is not about being stronger, he said, it is about being smarter. We studied our enemy for months before we fired a single shot. We learned their patterns, their weaknesses, and their fears. Most importantly, we learned that they expected us to be afraid. The alien delegates murmured among themselves in dozens of different languages. Many of them had never heard of warfare tactics that involved studying the enemy before fighting. Dr. Park Mina had accompanied Li Huan to the council meeting, and she was prepared to share her research. She presented her analysis of Vorthak psychology and explained how the enemy had become dependent on fear. The other species were shocked to learn that their greatest weakness was not their weapons or their ships, but their predictable reactions to psychological warfare. High Priestess Lyra of the Zephyrians spoke next. With her musical voice that sounded like wind chimes, your Dr. Park Mina suggests that we have been fighting incorrectly for thousands of years. How can we learn to fight like humans? Dr. Park Mina smiled and activated her presentation screen. The key is to understand that warfare is not just about technology or physical strength, it is about psychology and adaptability. Every species fights the same way because you all think the same way, but humans are different. She showed them recordings of human military history from Earth wars where smaller armies had defeated larger ones through superior tactics and determination. Battles where humans had won by doing exactly what their enemies did not expect. The alien delegates were fascinated by these examples. They had never seen warfare where the weaker side could win through intelligence and creativity. Their own military traditions were based on honor, strength, and direct confrontation. Engineer Kim Day was invited to explain the technical modifications that had been made to human ships. He showed them how the tenacity had been modified to avoid vortex sensors and how the mining equipment had been turned into weapons. The technology is not complicated, he said. The important thing is to think differently about how to use it. We did not try to build bigger guns or stronger shields. We found ways to avoid fighting the enemy on their terms. Over the following weeks, human tactical advisors were sent to every major council fleet. The alien crews began learning human methods of warfare, but the results were mixed at first. Many species found it difficult to change their thinking after thousands of years of traditional fighting. The Krell were the most successful students because their warrior culture valued discipline and precision. They learned to be patient and to wait for the right moment to strike. The Zephyrians struggled more because they were used to fighting with individual honor rather than as a team. The collective had the hardest time because they were used to thinking as one mind, but human tactics required individual initiative and the ability to adapt quickly to changing situations. But slowly things began to change. Council fleets started winning battles against Vorthak forces. The enemy was no longer invincible, and their advance through the galaxy was slowing down. Admiral Keth Vorthak had survived the battle at Proxima, and he was not pleased with these developments. He had reported to the Vorthak High Command that the humans were more dangerous than anyone had realized. High Command decided to send a special task force to deal with the human problem. A fleet of the most advanced Vorthak ships was assembled with orders to destroy every human colony and eliminate the species that was teaching the galaxy to resist. But the Vorthak had made a critical error. They still thought of humans as weak creatures who had gotten lucky. Once they did not understand that human nature was based on surviving impossible situations. Dr. Park Mina research was being studied by alien scientists throughout the galaxy. Her work on human psychology had revealed something that even humans had not fully understood about themselves. Humans were the only species that had evolved under constant threat of extinction. Earth was a dangerous world where survival required intelligence, creativity, and the ability to adapt quickly to new threats. Every other species had evolved on safer worlds where cooperation and logic were more important than determination and stubbornness. This explained why human tactics were so effective against the Vorthak and why other species found them difficult to learn. Humans had been preparing for this kind of warfare for millions of years without even knowing it. Lieutenant Commander Choi Sang was now training alien officers in human military academies that had been established on several worlds. The classes were always full because everyone wanted to learn the tactics that could defeat the Vorthak, but he noticed something interesting about his students. The alien officers who were most successful at learning human tactics were those who had experienced real danger in their lives. The pampered nobles and career politicians could not understand what it meant to fight for survival. The galaxy was changing in ways that no one had expected. The peaceful civilizations that had ruled for thousands of years were being replaced by societies that valued determination and adaptability over comfort and security. Captain Leah Wan received reports from human colonies throughout the galaxy. Every human settlement was now a fortress equipped with modified technology and crews trained in human warfare tactics. The species that had been considered the weakest was becoming the backbone of the Council defense, but Leah Wan knew that the real test was yet to come. Intelligence reports showed that the Vorthak were massing their largest fleet ever for an attack on the core systems of the galaxy. If they succeeded, billions of people would die, and the war would be over. The enemy had learned from their defeats, and they were adapting their tactics to counter human strategies. The next phase of the war would be different and more dangerous than anything the galaxy had seen before. The humans had awakened something in the galaxy, a spirit of resistance that had been sleeping for thousands of years, but now they would have to prove that their methods could work against an enemy that was no longer underestimating them. The Final battle was coming, and everyone knew that the fate of the galaxy would be decided by how well the other species had learned to fight like humans.